I drove my son-in-law to the airport, said goodbye, and headed home. Then my loyal housekeeper of 15 years texted, "Stay away from the house. Check the security cameras right now." I pulled over and opened the app. And froze. There, in my study, stood my son-in-law, the one I'd just dropped at the airport, with my daughter. They were rifling through my files, photographing my will and bank statements, whispering, "The old man won't suspect a thing. Soon, this house and all the money will be ours." They thought I was a helpless old fool. They're about to learn how badly they miscalculated. Before continuing, subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is in your region right now. My name is Harold Bennett. I'm 68 years old, living in Scottsdale, Arizona. I spent 30 years building a restaurant empire from scratch. 7 locations of Bennett's Grill across the Phoenix metro area. Sold it all 5 years ago for $4.2 million. I thought retirement would be peaceful. I thought I'd spend my days collecting vintage watches and playing chess online. I thought my family loved me. I was wrong about that last part. Let me tell you about my daughter, Danielle. She's 37 now, and somewhere along the way, the little girl who used to sit on my lap while I taught her how to flip pancakes turned into someone I barely recognize. She married Jason Collins about 8 years ago. He's 41, works as a mid-level manager at some insurance company, pulling in maybe $67,000 a year. Not that there's anything wrong with that salary. What's wrong is how much he resents me for having more. They moved into my house 2 years ago. Temporarily, they said. Jason had made some bad investments. Danielle cried about how stressed they were, how they might lose their apartment. What was I supposed to do? She's my daughter. I gave them the entire east wing of the house. 2 bedrooms, a private bathroom, their own entrance if they wanted it. The first 6 months were fine. Danielle cooked dinner sometimes. Jason actually helped me fix the fence in the backyard. We watched football together on Sundays. I started to think maybe this arrangement could work. Then something shifted. It started with small things. The way Jason would sigh when I walked into the kitchen. The way Danielle stopped asking about my day. Then came the comments. "Dad, do you really need another watch? You have dozens already. Harold, maybe you shouldn't drive at night anymore. Your reflexes aren't what they used to be." They started talking about me in the third person while I was in the room. "He's getting forgetful," Danielle would say to Jason. "Did you notice he asked the same question twice at dinner?" I noticed. I noticed everything. 30 years of running restaurants teaches you to read people. You learn to spot the server who's skimming from the register, the cook who's cutting corners, the customer who's about to cause a scene. My mind is sharp as ever, but I played along. I pretended not to notice the looks they exchanged behind my back. That particular morning started like any other. Jason had a conference in Denver. At least, that's what he told me. He asked if I could drive him to the airport. His car was in the shop, he said. Danielle was still asleep when we left at 6 in the morning. The drive to Phoenix Sky Harbor took about 30 minutes. Jason was on his phone the whole time, texting someone. He barely said 2 words to me until we pulled up to the terminal. "Thanks for the ride, Harold," he said, grabbing his carry-on from the back seat. Not, "Thanks, Dad," never Dad, always Harold, like I was some acquaintance he tolerated. "Have a good trip," I said. He walked into the terminal without looking back. I watched him disappear through the automatic doors, then merged back into traffic. I was about 20 minutes from home when my phone buzzed. A text from Eleanor Mendoza, my housekeeper. She's been with my family for 15 years. I helped pay for her husband's cancer treatment a decade ago. He pulled through, thank goodness. Eleanor is loyal in a way that's rare these days. She sees everything that happens in that house. Her message made my blood run cold. "Stay away from the house. Check security cameras immediately." I pulled into the parking lot of a shopping center on East Shea Boulevard. My hands were steady as I opened the security app on my phone. I installed those cameras 2 years ago when there was a string of break-ins in the neighborhood. Danielle and Jason knew about the ones by the doors. They didn't know about the one hidden in my study. The live feed. Loaded. My study. And in my private sanctuary, where I kept all my important documents. Danielle was there. And Jason. Jason, who was supposed to be flying to Denver right now, was standing right next to her. He must have walked straight through the terminal and caught a taxi home. They were going through my filing cabinet. Danielle was photographing documents with her phone, while Jason rifled through the drawers of my desk. "The will is here somewhere," Jason said. "And we need his bank statements. All of them." "What about the house deed?" Danielle asked. "We'll get a copy from the county recorder if we have to, but the medical records are more important. We need to build the case." I turned up the volume on my phone, leaning closer to the small screen. "Dr. Patterson's office said they can't just give us his records," Danielle said. "Privacy laws." Jason laughed. It was an ugly sound. "Once we file the petition, the court can subpoena them. All we need is enough documentation to show cognitive decline. The lawyer said 3 incidents minimum. We've got the time he forgot where he parked at the grocery store, the time he left the stove on. And your cousin will testify she noticed him repeating himself at Thanksgiving." My jaw tightened. The stove incident was Jason's fault. He'd distracted me while I was cooking. The parking lot confusion happened when they'd moved my car as a joke. And at Thanksgiving I'd repeated a story because Jason's mother hadn't heard it the first time. They were manufacturing evidence, building a case to declare me mentally incompetent. "How long until we can get control of his accounts?" Danielle asked. "Conservatorship takes about 3 to 4 months if we push it. Once we're appointed as conservators, we control everything. The house, the investments, the bank accounts. All of it." Danielle set down the folder she was holding and looked at her husband. "He's going to fight it." "With what?" "He'll hire some lawyer, sure, but by then we'll have doctors on our side, testimony from family members, documented incidents. It'll be our word against his, and he's a 68-year-old man living alone with declining mental faculties." Jason smiled. "At least, that's what the judge will see." They continued searching for another 20 minutes. I watched every second, my phone recording the screen. Finally, they seemed satisfied with what they'd gathered. Jason stuffed some papers into a folder. "I'll take a late flight tonight," he said. "Show up in Denver tomorrow morning. Attend 1 session of the conference. Fly back Thursday." Perfect alibi. Danielle nodded. Then she said the words that burned themselves into my memory. "In a month, this house will be ours. The old man won't suspect a thing." I sat in that parking lot for a long time after the feed went dark. The Arizona sun was climbing higher, heating in the interior of my car, but I didn't notice. I was thinking about chess. In chess, there's a concept called zugzwang. It's when any move a player makes will worsen their position, but they're compelled to move anyway. My daughter and her husband thought they had me in zugzwang. They thought I was an old man, oblivious and vulnerable, waiting to be captured. They forgot something important. I didn't build 7 restaurants from nothing by being stupid. And I didn't survive 30 years in one of the toughest businesses in America by letting people steal from me. The old man won't suspect a thing. I started my car and pulled out of the parking lot. But I didn't drive home, not yet. I had some moves to plan first. I drove past my own house without stopping. The Lexus Jason claimed was in the shop, sat in the driveway, gleaming in the morning sun. Another lie. I wondered how many there had been over the past 2 years. How many dinners had they eaten at my table while planning to take everything I'd built? The Marriott on North Scottsdale Road had a room available. I paid cash, requested no housekeeping, and locked myself inside with my laptop and my thoughts. The security system I'd installed stored footage on a cloud server. 3 months of recordings, automatically overwritten after 90 days. I had 87 days of history to review. I started with the oldest footage and worked forward. The pattern emerged quickly. Every time I left the house for more than an hour, they moved. Sometimes it was just conversation in the kitchen, voices low, heads bent together. Other times, Jason would slip into my study while Danielle kept watch. They'd photographed hundreds of documents over the past 3 months. Bank statements, investment accounts, the deed to my house, my medical records, which I realized they must have stolen from the folder I kept in my bedroom closet. One recording from 6 weeks ago stopped me cold. Danielle was sitting at the kitchen table, papers spread out in front of her. Jason stood behind her, pointing at something on a legal document. "A conservatorship gives us full control," he was saying. "We become his legal guardians, basically. He won't be able to sell anything, withdraw money, or even change his will without our approval. And the best part is, he'll still be living in the house, so it won't look like we locked him away somewhere. We'll seem like the devoted daughter and son-in-law caring for their aging father." Danielle nodded slowly. "What if he tries to give money to Eleanor? Or to charity? He's been talking about donating to some veterans organization. Once we're conservators, any gift over $500 requires court approval, which means our approval. The old man won't be able to sneeze without our permission." Danielle laughed. Actually laughed. I closed the laptop and stared at the hotel wall. My mind drifted to a memory from 23 years ago. Danielle was 14, and I was teaching her to drive in the parking lot of my first restaurant. It was a Sunday morning. The place closed and empty. "Turn the wheel more," I said. "Feel the car respond. Driving is about confidence, sweetheart. The car goes where you tell it to go." She was nervous, gripping the steering wheel so hard her knuckles were white. We'd barely moved 50 feet. "What if I hit something?" "Then we fix it. There's nothing in this parking lot you could hit that would matter more than you learning this skill." "I believe in you, Danielle." She looked at me with those big brown eyes, the same eyes her mother had. "You really think I can do this?" "I know you can. You're a Bennett. We don't give up, and we don't give in." That afternoon, she drove 3 laps around the parking lot without a single mistake. She was so proud. I was so proud. I took her for ice cream afterward, and she talked about getting her license, about the freedom she'd have, about all the places she wanted to go. Where did that girl go? I remembered another moment. 5 years ago, the day I signed the papers selling Bennett's Grill. The buyer's representatives had just left my lawyer's office, and I was sitting alone with a check for $4.2 million. My phone rang. "Danielle, Dad, I heard you sold the restaurants. Congratulations." Her voice was warm, excited. "We should celebrate. Dinner this weekend? My treat." "I'd love that, sweetheart." That dinner never happened. She canceled 3 times. Work emergencies, scheduling conflicts, a migraine. Eventually, we stopped trying to reschedule. But 3 months later, she called again. Jason had lost money in cryptocurrency. Could I help with their rent? Just until they got back on their feet? I sent $15,000. Looking back now, sitting in that hotel room with evidence of their betrayal glowing on my laptop screen, I could trace the trajectory of our relationship like a stock chart. Every spike of warmth corresponded to a request for money. Every dip followed my refusal or hesitation. My daughter didn't love me. She loved what I could provide, and when providing wasn't enough, she decided to simply take. The next morning I started making calls. The first was to a law firm specializing in elder law. Ironic, given the circumstances. I spoke with Marcus Wheeler, a senior partner with a reputation for handling conservatorship disputes. His rate was $450 per hour. Worth every penny. "What you're describing is unfortunately common," Wheeler said, after I'd explained the situation. "It's called conservatorship fraud. Family members manufacture evidence of cognitive decline to gain legal control over an elderly person's assets. Arizona has some of the strongest elder abuse laws in the country, but prevention is always better than litigation." "What do I do?" "First, we document your mental competency independently." I'll refer you to a geriatric psychiatrist who can conduct a full cognitive evaluation. Second, we begin restructuring your assets to protect them from conservatorship claims. Third, we gather evidence of their scheme. Those security recordings are excellent, but we'll need more. My second call was to Rachel Simpson, a private investigator Wheeler recommended. She'd spent 12 years as a Phoenix police detective before going private. Her voice was all business. I need complete background checks on 2 people, I told her, and ongoing surveillance if possible, financial records, employment history, any legal issues, everything you can find. I charge $200 per hour plus expenses. I'll need names and whatever information you have. I gave her Jason and Danielle's details. She said she'd have a preliminary report within a week. I returned home that evening like nothing had happened. Eleanor met me at the door with worried eyes, but I gave her a small nod. Not here, not now, she understood. Danielle was in the kitchen when I walked in, stirring something on the stove. She turned with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Dad? Where were you? I tried calling. Phone died. I had some errands to run after dropping Jason off." I kissed her forehead, the same way I'd done since she was small. "What's for dinner?" "Chicken marsala, your favorite." My favorite is actually beef stroganoff. But I didn't correct her. "Smells wonderful." Over dinner I played my role. Forgetful old man. I asked twice what time Jason's flight landed. I pretended to mishear something Danielle said. I mentioned that I couldn't remember where I'd put my reading glasses. They were on my head the whole time. I watched her notice each slip. Watched her file them away for future use. After dinner I retreated to my study. Sat in my leather chair. Looked at the filing cabinet they'd ransacked. Everything carefully returned to its original position. They thought they were clever. 3 days later, Danielle mentioned that I seemed different lately. More distant, she said. Was everything okay? Just tired, I told her. Don't sleep as well as I used to. But she kept watching me. I felt her eyes following me around the house. At breakfast, she studied my face when I reached for the coffee. At dinner, she noted how much wine I poured. She was building her case, observation by observation. Then came the mistake. I was never particularly careful about my browser history. Why would I be? I lived alone? Well, I thought I did, in my own house. But that evening I left my laptop open on the kitchen counter while I went to answer the door. A delivery driver with a package. When I returned 2 minutes later, Jason was standing at the counter. His face was pale. In his hand was his phone, showing a photograph of my laptop screen. "Interesting reading material, Harold," he said quietly. "Elder law attorney Scottsdale." I kept my expression neutral. "I'm 68. Estate planning seems prudent." "At 9 in the morning?" "Right after you dropped me at the airport," I shrugged. "I had time to kill. Started thinking about the future." He didn't believe me. I could see it in his eyes and the slight tremor of his hand as he pocketed his phone. Later that night I heard murmured voices from the East Wing. He was telling Danielle the game had changed. They knew I was looking into protecting myself. They didn't know how much I'd already discovered. I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling. In chess, when your opponent realizes you're not the easy target they assumed, they have 2 choices: retreat or accelerate. Jason and Danielle wouldn't retreat. They'd invested too much time, too much planning. They would come at me faster now, harder. That was fine. I was ready. The old man was done suspecting. Now the old man knew. I predicted they would accelerate. I underestimated how fast. The morning after Jason discovered my browser history, I woke to the sound of Danielle's voice drifting up from the kitchen. She was on the phone, speaking in that sugary tone she reserved for relatives she needed something from. "I know, Aunt Patricia. It breaks my heart, too. He's just not the same man he used to be." A pause. "No, nothing dramatic. Little things. He repeats himself constantly. Leaves the stove on. Last week he couldn't remember where he parked at the grocery store and wandered around for 20 minutes. I stood at the top of the stairs, out of sight, listening. "Jason and I are doing everything we can. We moved in to help him, but it's getting harder. The other day he accused Eleanor of stealing his watch. It was on his nightstand the whole time. Another pause, longer this time. Would you be willing to? I mean, if it ever came to court, your testimony would mean so much. I retreated to my bedroom and closed the door softly. The watch incident never happened. Danielle had just invented it, while talking to my sister-in-law. I had to admire the creativity, even as it made my stomach turn. Over the next 2 weeks, I watched them work. Rachel Simpson, my private investigator, had set up surveillance on their phones. Perfectly legal, since they were using my home Wi-Fi network and I owned the router. The things people discuss over text messages when they think no one is watching. Jason had consulted with an attorney named Gerald Hoffman. $200 for an initial consultation about caring for an aging family member. The texts between him and Danielle read like a military operation. Target identified, assets mapped, timeline established. They were keeping a journal. Rachel obtained a copy through means I didn't ask about. Every entry documented a fabricated incident of my supposed decline. The dates, I noticed, corresponded to days I'd been out of the house. They were writing fiction and calling it evidence. Meanwhile, I was building my own case. Dr. Anthony Grant's office occupied the 3rd floor of a medical building on East Indian School Road. He was a geriatric psychiatrist, 61 years old, with a reputation for thorough, unbiased evaluations. Wheeler had recommended him specifically because he'd testified in dozens of conservatorship cases, sometimes for the petitioners, sometimes against. Judges trusted him. The cognitive evaluation took 4 hours. Memory tests, logic puzzles, verbal reasoning, mathematical calculations. Dr. Grant asked me to draw a clock showing 10 minutes past 11. He asked me to count backward from 100 by sevens. He asked me to name as many animals as I could in 60 seconds. 37 animals, he noted, writing on his clipboard. That's exceptional for any age. At the end, he sat across from me with his hands folded. Mr. Bennett, I'll be blunt. Your cognitive function is not just normal for a man your age. It's above average. Your memory is sharp, your reasoning is sound, and your executive function is excellent. If someone attempts to claim you're mentally incompetent, I will testify otherwise under oath. I left his office with a 12-page report documenting my mental fitness. Cost me $1,800. Worth every cent. The following week, I met with Wheeler at his office on East Camelback Road. The building was all glass and steel, the kind of place that announced serious legal firepower before you even walked through the door. We need to restructure your assets, Wheeler said, spreading documents across his conference table. Right now, if they succeed with a conservatorship, everything you own becomes their playground. Your house, your investments, your bank accounts, all controlled by them. What do you suggest? An irrevocable trust. We transfer your major assets into a trust that you control, but technically don't own. If a court later appoints a conservator over you personally, that conservator has no authority over trust assets. He slid a paper toward me. It's not a perfect shield, but it's a strong one. I spent the next 3 days signing documents. The house went into the trust. My investment accounts. My bank accounts above a certain threshold. I kept enough liquid cash to live on and pay legal fees. But the bulk of my $4 million was now protected behind legal walls that would take years to breach. Throughout all of this, I played my role at home. Forgetful Harold, confused Harold, Harold who needed help finding his reading glasses, who asked what day it was, who couldn't remember if he'd taken his vitamins. Danielle watched me with barely concealed satisfaction. Jason started treating me with exaggerated patience, the way you might speak to a child or a pet. That's okay, Harold. We all forget things sometimes. Every condescending word, every pitying glance went into my mental file. I was cataloging their rare cruelty for the day when I'd no longer need to pretend. Eleanor was my lifeline. We communicated through notes passed in the laundry room, through brief conversations when Jason and Danielle were out. She reported everything she overheard. The phone calls to relatives, the meetings with their attorney, the journal entries they dictated while she pretended to dust nearby. One evening, about 3 weeks after I'd started my counter-moves, I made a mistake. I'd been at Wheeler's office, signing the final trust documents. I was wearing my good navy blazer, the one I kept for important meetings. When I got home, Danielle was in the kitchen, and I went straight upstairs to change. The next morning I couldn't find the blazer. I searched my closet, checked the dry cleaning pile, looked in the guest room. Nothing. 2 days later, Danielle appeared at breakfast, holding a white envelope. "Dad, I found this in your jacket pocket." It was hanging in the downstairs closet. She placed the envelope on the table between us, her eyes searching my face. "Wheeler and Associates, isn't that a law firm?" The envelope was from Marcus Wheeler. Inside was a receipt for services rendered and a reminder about my next appointment. I kept my face blank. "Estate planning, sweetheart. A man my age needs to get his affairs in order. You're already working with Mr. Patterson for your will. Wheeler specializes in trusts. Different area of law." Danielle's smile didn't waver, but something shifted behind her eyes. A hardness I'd seen before. When she'd haggled aggressively with a car salesman, when she'd argued with a restaurant manager over a bill. Calculating. Reassessing. "That's smart, Dad. Very responsible of you." She patted my hand. "Let me know if you need any help understanding the paperwork. Legal documents can be so confusing." That evening I heard her on the phone with Jason, who was working late. Her voice was a hiss I could barely make out through the closed door of the East Wing. "He's working with another lawyer. Wheeler specializes in asset protection." I looked it up. A pause. "We need to move faster. If he transfers everything into a trust, we're finished." I smiled in the darkness of the hallway. The race was on, and they were already too late. The summons arrived on a Tuesday morning, exactly 32 days after I'd driven Jason to the airport. A process server appeared at my door while I was having breakfast. He was young, apologetic, just doing his job. He handed me a thick envelope and asked me to sign a receipt confirming delivery. "In the Superior Court of Arizona, County of Maricopa," I read aloud after he'd left. "Petition for appointment of conservator." Danielle and Jason were petitioning to be appointed as my conservators. The document cited progressive cognitive decline, inability to manage personal affairs, and risk of financial exploitation by third parties. It included a list of alleged incidents: the stove, the parking lot, the watch, the repeated stories. A dozen fabricated examples of my supposed incompetence. The hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks out. I called Wheeler immediately. He was calm, almost amused. "This is actually good news," he said. "They've shown their hand. Now we respond." Over the next 2 weeks, we prepared our defense. Wheeler filed a response denying all allegations. He submitted Dr. Grant's cognitive evaluation, all 12 pages of it. He included a declaration from Eleanor Mendoza describing the incidents she'd witnessed being staged. And then he played our strongest card. "We're requesting that the court review the attached video evidence," Wheeler wrote in his filing. "These recordings obtained from a legally installed home security system document the petitioners engaged in the systematic search and unauthorized copying of the respondent's private financial and medical documents." The preliminary hearing was held at the Maricopa County Superior Court, a sprawling complex in downtown Phoenix. I arrived with Wheeler an hour early, dressed in my best suit, my mind sharp and focused. Danielle and Jason were already there, sitting with their attorney, a thin man named Hoffman with nervous eyes. My daughter was wearing a modest dress I'd never seen before, her hair pulled back, her makeup understated. She looked like a concerned daughter from a pharmaceutical commercial. When she saw me, She actually had the nerve to offer a small, sad smile, as if she were doing this for my own good. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected. Wood paneling, fluorescent lights, an American flag behind the judge's bench. Judge Patricia Yamamoto presided, a stern woman in her late 50s with a reputation for asking hard questions. "This is a preliminary hearing," she announced after calling the case. "We're here to determine if the petitioners have established sufficient grounds to proceed with a full conservatorship evaluation. Mr. Hoffman, you may begin." Hoffman stood, buttoning his jacket. "Your Honor, my clients are here out of love and concern for Mr. Bennett. Over the past several months, they've witnessed disturbing changes in his cognitive function. He forgets basic information. He's left the stove on, creating a fire risk. He's become confused and disoriented in public. They fear he's vulnerable to financial exploitation and seek only to protect him." Judge Yamamoto's expression remained neutral. "Mr. Wheeler?" My attorney rose slowly, deliberately. He was a man who understood the power of silence and timing. "Your Honor, my client is a 68-year-old man who built a successful business empire over 3 decades. He sold that business 5 years ago and has been enjoying a well-earned retirement. His mind is sharp, his judgment is sound, and the only people attempting to exploit him financially are the 2 individuals sitting at that table." Danielle's face went pale. Jason's jaw tightened. Wheeler continued, "I'd like to submit Exhibit A, a comprehensive cognitive evaluation conducted by Dr. Anthony Grant, a board-certified geriatric psychiatrist. Dr. Grant's conclusion is unambiguous. Mr. Bennett shows no signs of cognitive decline. His mental function is, in fact, above average for his age." He handed copies to the judge and opposing counsel. "Exhibit B," Wheeler said, "is a series of video recordings from my client's home security system. These recordings show the petitioners repeatedly entering my client's private study without permission, searching through his documents, and photographing financial records. In one recording, which I'll play for the court with your permission, the petitioners can be heard discussing their plan to, and I quote, "get control of his accounts through conservatorship." Judge Yamamoto leaned forward. "You have video evidence of this?" "I do, Your Honor. Time-stamped and authenticated." The video played on a screen, wheeled in by a court technician. The same footage I'd watched in that shopping center parking lot, now projected for a judge to see. Jason's voice filled the courtroom. "Conservatorship takes about 3 to 4 months if we push it. Once we're appointed as conservators, we control everything." I watched my daughter's face as the recording played. The color drained from her cheeks. Her hands, folded in her lap, began to tremble. Jason's confident posture crumbled. He slouched in his chair like a man watching his future collapse. Finally, Wheeler said, "Exhibit C documents multiple attempts by Jason Collins to access my client's financial accounts without authorization. 3 failed login attempts on his brokerage account. 2 calls to his bank, requesting information while impersonating Mr. Bennett. The institutions have records." Judge Yamamoto removed her glasses and rubbed her eyes. When she spoke, her voice was cold. "Mr. Hoffman, were you aware of this evidence before filing your petition?" Hoffman looked like he wanted to disappear. "No, Your Honor. My clients represented that. Your clients represented false information to this court." The judge turned to Danielle and Jason. "I'm going to be very clear. Filing a fraudulent conservatorship petition is not a civil matter. It's a criminal offense under Arizona law. This court takes elder abuse extremely seriously." Danielle spoke for the first time, her voice cracking. "Your Honor, we were just trying to help. You were trying to steal from your father," the judge cut her off. "And you nearly succeeded. The petition is denied. Furthermore, I'm referring this matter to the county prosecutor's office for investigation." Jason's face went from pale to gray. Danielle started crying, though whether from shame or fear of consequences, I couldn't tell. After the hearing, I stood outside the courthouse in the Arizona sun. Wheeler was beside me, already discussing next steps. But I barely heard him. My phone buzzed. A text from Rachel Simpson. "Call me immediately. Found something on Jason Collins you need to see. He's done this before." I excused myself and dialed her number. "Mr. Bennett," Rachel said, "I've been digging into your son-in-law's past. 8 years ago, before he married your daughter, he was married to another woman, an older woman. Her name was Barbara Turner, and she was 72 when they married. She died 11 months later, under what the police called suspicious circumstances. Jason collected $180,000 in life insurance plus whatever she left him in her will." I leaned against the warm stone of the courthouse wall. "The case was closed," Rachel continued. "Not enough evidence to prosecute. But here's the interesting part. 3 months after Barbara Turner died, Jason Collins moved to Arizona. 6 months after that, he started dating your daughter." The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. This wasn't just about money. This wasn't even about my money specifically. This was a pattern. Jason Collins was a predator, and my daughter was either his accomplice or his next victim. Either way, I was going to find out. Rachel Simpson sat across from me at the rusty spur, a worn folder between us on the table. The lunch crowd had thinned, leaving us in a quiet corner where we wouldn't be overheard. "Barbara Turner," Rachel said, sliding a photograph toward me. An elderly woman with kind eyes and silver hair, smiling at the camera. 72 years old. Retired schoolteacher in Henderson, Nevada. Widowed for 8 years when she met Jason Collins at a community center bingo night. "Bingo night," I repeated. "He was volunteering, calling numbers, helping the seniors, being charming." Rachel's voice was flat. "They married 4 months after they met. 11 months later, she was found at the bottom of her basement stairs. Broken neck. The coroner ruled it accidental." I studied the photograph. Barbara Turner looked like someone's grandmother, someone who baked cookies and sent birthday cards and trusted people too easily. "The insurance company investigated," Rachel continued. "They found it suspicious that Jason had increased her policy from $50,000 to $200,000 just 2 months before her death. But they couldn't prove anything. He collected $180,000 after deductibles, plus her house, which he sold for $320,000, plus whatever cash she had in her accounts. $500,000. That's what Barbara Turner's trust had been worth to Jason Collins. How did you find this?" "Started with his Social Security records. He changed addresses a lot before Nevada. Traced him back to California, then Oregon. In Oregon, he was engaged to a 68-year-old woman named Patricia Vaughn. The engagement ended abruptly when her son hired a background check company and found Jason had been fired from 3 jobs for theft." I pushed back from the table. "Does my daughter know?" "That's the question, isn't it?" Rachel closed the folder. "I can't tell you what's in her head, Mr. Bennett, but I can tell you that she benefits from this scheme. Whether she knows about Barbara Turner or not, she's actively participating in trying to take your assets." The next morning I called Wheeler and asked him to connect me with the Maricopa County Prosecutor's Office. They were already investigating the fraudulent conservatorship petition. When I shared Rachel's findings about Barbara Turner, the conversation became very serious, very quickly. 2 days later, a reporter from a local television station called me. She'd been covering elder abuse stories for years, and someone at the prosecutor's office had tipped her off about my case. She wanted an interview. I agreed. The segment aired the following week. "Schemes Against Seniors: How Family Members Exploit Arizona's Elderly" was the headline. The reporter walked viewers through the conservatorship fraud process, using my case as an example. With my permission, and with my face blurred for privacy. But the real bombshell was Jason Collins. The station had done their own investigation. They'd found Barbara Turner's family in Nevada, including a niece who had always suspected something wasn't right about her aunt's death. They'd obtained the insurance company's investigation files through a public records request. They'd traced Jason's pattern of targeting vulnerable people. The segment ended with Jason's photograph filling the screen, and a simple question: how many other victims are out there? The fallout was immediate, and devastating. Jason's employer, a regional insurance company, launched an internal investigation within hours of the broadcast. By the end of the week, he was placed on administrative leave. His coworkers, neighbors, and casual acquaintances suddenly remembered appointments they'd forgotten. Friends stopped returning calls. Danielle fared no better. The women in her book club quietly removed her from their group chat. Her yoga studio suggested she might be more comfortable practicing at home for a while. Even her hairdresser of 12 years suddenly had no available appointments. They became toxic, untouchable. The social death that comes when an entire community decides you're not worth knowing. 3 days after the broadcast, Danielle appeared in my study doorway. She looked like she hadn't slept in a week. Her hair was unwashed, her clothes wrinkled, her eyes red-rimmed and desperate. "Dad," her voice was hoarse. "Please, you have to make this stop." I set down the book I'd been reading. "Make what stop?" "The news, the investigation, all of it." She took a step into the room. "I know we made mistakes, but this is destroying us. Jason can't work. I can't leave the house without people staring. We've lost everything." I regarded her calmly. "You tried to have me declared mentally incompetent so you could steal my money. What exactly did you expect would happen?" "I didn't." She stopped, swallowed. "Jason said it was just to protect the family. He said you were making bad decisions, that someone needed to step in. I believed him. You photographed my bank statements. You invented incidents of cognitive decline. You called relatives and lied about my behavior." I leaned forward in my chair. "Those aren't the actions of someone who was deceived, Danielle. Those are the actions of someone who wanted something and didn't care who got hurt." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "He manipulated me. You don't understand what he's like. He convinced me that this was the only way, that you'd thank us later." "Did he convince you that I left the stove on?" Because I distinctly remember Jason distracting me that evening. My voice was cold, steady. "Did he convince you that I couldn't find my car at the grocery store?" "Because I remember exactly where I parked. It's where you and Jason moved it as a joke while I was shopping." She had no answer for that. "You had 2 years," I said. 2 years living in my home, eating my food, using my money to pay your debts. 2 years to be my daughter. You chose to be a thief instead." "Dad, please. I think you should leave now." She stood there for a long moment, tears streaming, waiting for me to relent. I didn't. Finally, she turned and walked out. That night, I heard voices from the East Wing, raised voices, angry. Danielle and Jason arguing. The walls were thick, but I caught fragments. "Your fault. Should have been more careful. Told you he was smarter than..." Around 3 in the morning, I heard a car start. From my bedroom window, I watched Jason's Lexus pull out of the driveway, headlights cutting through the darkness. He didn't look up at the house. He didn't look back. The next morning, Danielle's eyes were swollen, nearly shut from crying. She sat at the kitchen table staring at nothing. "He left," she said, her voice hollow. "Took the car, emptied our joint account, $8,000, everything we had." I poured myself a cup of coffee. "I'm not surprised. He said he needed to clear his head, that he'd be back in a few days." She laughed, a broken sound. I believed him. After everything, I still believed him. I sat down across from her. For a moment, I saw the little girl she used to be. Frightened, confused, desperately wanting someone to tell her everything would be okay. But I wasn't that person anymore. She'd made sure of that. "Jason Collins is a predator," I said quietly. "He's been doing this for years. Barbara Turner, Patricia Vaughn, probably others we don't know about. He targeted vulnerable people, gained their trust, and took everything he could." Danielle's face went white. "What?" "The woman before you. His first wife. She died under suspicious circumstances, 11 months after their wedding. He collected $500,000. No. She shook her head. No, that's not. He never mentioned. He wouldn't, would he? She stared at me and I watched the realization dawn in her eyes. The understanding of exactly what kind of man she'd married. The understanding of what she'd helped him try to do to me. I finished my coffee and stood up. The prosecutor is going to have questions for you, I said. I'd suggest answering them honestly. It might be the only thing that saves you from prison. I left her sitting alone at the kitchen table, contemplating the wreckage of her choices. The final hearing took place 6 weeks after Jason Collins disappeared. They found him at a checkpoint south of Tucson, trying to cross into Mexico with $12,000 in cash and a bag full of prepaid debit cards. He'd been using back roads, avoiding major highways, sleeping in his car. The Border Patrol agent who pulled him over said he looked like he hadn't showered in a week. The Maricopa County prosecutor charged him with elder abuse under Arizona Revised Statutes, Section 46-456, attempted fraud, and filing a false court petition. The Nevada authorities, working with new evidence Rachel had uncovered, reopened the Barbara Turner case. They charged him with insurance fraud and were investigating potential manslaughter charges. His bail was set at $500,000. He couldn't make it. The man who'd spent years stealing from the vulnerable now sat in a cell, awaiting trial. Danielle's situation was more complicated. Wheeler advised me that she faced serious charges: conspiracy to commit elder abuse, fraud, filing false documents with the court. If convicted, she could serve up to 4 years in state prison. The prosecutor offered a deal: full cooperation, testimony against Jason, and a guilty plea to reduced charges. In exchange, she'd receive 3 years of probation, 200 hours of community service, and a permanent restraining order keeping her away from me. She took it. I watched the final sentencing hearing from the back of the courtroom. Danielle stood before Judge Yamamoto, in a simple gray dress, her hands clasped in front of her, her head bowed. She looked smaller somehow. Diminished. Ms. Bennett Collins, the judge said, you participated in a scheme to defraud your own father. You lied to this court. You attempted to have a competent man declared incompetent so you could control his assets. These are serious offenses. Danielle nodded slightly but said nothing. However, the evidence suggests you were manipulated by your husband, who has a documented history of elder exploitation. Your cooperation with prosecutors has been valuable in building the case against him. The judge paused. I'm accepting the plea agreement. 3 years probation, 200 hours community service, and a restraining order prohibiting contact with Harold Bennett for a period of 5 years. Danielle's shoulders sagged with relief. She turned briefly, and her eyes found mine in the back of the courtroom. I saw something in her face: shame, regret, a desperate hope for forgiveness. I felt nothing. The following week, I met with Wheeler to finalize the paperwork. The disinheritance was straightforward under Arizona law. Danielle would receive nothing from my estate, not the house, not the investments, not a single dollar of the fortune I'd spent 30 years building. Are you certain about this? Wheeler asked, his pen hovering over the document. She made her choice. I'm making mine. I signed the papers. Eleanor Mendoza cried when I told her about the changes to my will. $150,000 and the right to live in the guest house for as long as she wanted, rent-free, for the rest of her life. Mr. Bennett, I can't. You saved me, I said simply. That text message, the warning about the cameras. If you hadn't sent it, I might not have discovered their plan until it was too late. This is the least I can do. She hugged me. The first time in 15 years she'd done anything so informal. I hugged her back. I sold the house on East Thunderbird Road for $1.4 million, slightly above asking price. A young family bought it. A couple with 2 children and a golden retriever. They seemed happy. I hoped the house would treat them better than it had treated me. My new place was a condominium in a gated community near Old Town Scottsdale. 2 bedrooms, modern kitchen, a balcony with a view of Camelback Mountain. It was smaller than what I was used to, but it was mine. No east wing, no unwanted guests. The evening I moved in, I set up my computer in the spare bedroom I'd converted into a study. Smaller than my old one, but comfortable. I logged into my chess account and found a game waiting, an opponent from somewhere in Eastern Europe who'd been climbing the rankings. We played for an hour. It was a good match, back and forth, neither of us gaining a clear advantage until the endgame. I'd positioned my pieces carefully, patiently, waiting for him to make a mistake. When he finally overextended his queen, I struck. Checkmate in 4 moves. As I was about to log off, a notification popped up. A message from a new account, created that same day. "Dad, it's Danielle. Please don't close this. I know I can't contact you directly because of the court order, but I needed to tell you I'm sorry. I was wrong. I was selfish and stupid, and I let Jason convince me that what we were doing was okay. It wasn't. I know that now. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I just wanted you to know that I understand why you can't. I'm working on being better. Maybe someday, when the restraining order expires, we could try again. If you want to. I love you, Dad. I always did, even when I wasn't showing it." I read the message twice. Then I closed the chat window without responding. On my screen, the chessboard still showed my winning position. My king stood secure, protected by pieces I'd carefully developed throughout the game. My opponent's king was trapped, surrounded, with no moves left that wouldn't make things worse. Zugzwang. They'd thought they had me in that position. The old man who wouldn't suspect a thing, the easy target, the vulnerable prey. They forgot that I'd spent 30 years in business. I knew how to read people. I knew how to plan. I knew how to wait for the right moment and then strike with precision. Jason Collins would spend years in prison for what he'd done to Barbara Turner and what he'd tried to do to me. Danielle would spend years living with the consequences of her choices, wearing an ankle monitor for the first 12 months, explaining to future employers why she had a criminal record. And I would spend my remaining years exactly as I'd planned. In peace, surrounded by my vintage watches, playing chess with strangers around the world, answerable to no one. I looked out my window at the Arizona sunset. The sky painted in shades of orange and red. Beautiful evening. A good day to be alive. Some people say revenge is a dish best served cold. I disagree. Revenge is a chess game. You study the board, you anticipate your opponent's moves, you position your pieces, and when the moment is right, you strike. Checkmate. If you liked this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.